Good morning.
Good morning.
Before we start, let's bow our heads in prayer. Father in heaven, we ask that you send your Holy Spirit this morning to be with us as we study Jesus' words. We ask that you be with us in this crazy world that's going on right now. Help us to focus and remember your soon coming and to keep our eyes on you. We ask it in your name. Amen. Well, I have a choice this morning. See you or read the Bible. Okay. I think I'm going to have to do that. Normally, I'm always pulling my glasses off and putting them back on and going back and forth. And, I can read without my glasses because we got good light. But this fuzzy shield in front of me unfocuses things. You ever asked yourself, what should I do? You know, that question comes up all the time. What should I do? It may be for many, many, many reasons. What should you do? The other question that comes up, what can I do? I keep getting this. I gotta learn how not to do that. And when I first retired the first time in November of 1999, the question came up, what am I going to do? So I went and took a job. And it was just down the street from where I lived. And, well, make a long story short, I ended up going back to work for the state of Oregon. And I worked another 16 years. But the question was, what can I do? And the other thing is, how can I help? And I was very fortunate that essentially my last 16 years was helping people start fire departments. It's as simple as it gets. So I was doing something. And then when I retired for the second time in June of 2015, it was, what am I going to do? What should I do? What can I do? How can I help? And so this question comes up all the time. But think about that. Think about what it says in the Bible. And we have Jesus as an example. And, you know, a lot of things we've got to just focus back on what Jesus is saying to us. And it'll help us get through these, what am I going to do things. At home, I have all kinds of things to do. I have plenty of hobbies. I have too many hobbies. I try to do too many things. And so I'm never lacking. But you come back and you ask yourself, what's Jesus want me to do? So, the Bible's full of examples of this. And what I've chosen to do this morning is focus on parts of what Jesus said in his ministry. Because the whole Bible tells us what to do. But I was focusing only on what Jesus said during his ministry on earth. And this whole subject of what can I do and what the Bible can tell me to do, you guys want to go home and eat lunch today. So So, if you'll follow along in the Bible with me, okay, and I'm going to stick with Matthew, because when I was looking this up, when the pastor asked me to do this, when I was looking it up, I went back and I looked at Matthew, and really, Matthew really covers a lot in what Jesus said. So let's start with Matthew 5, verses 1 through 12. And if you're familiar with it, it's commonly referred to as the Beatitudes. Now I'm going to paraphrase a lot of these. So follow with me. So we're in Matthew 5, verses 1 through 12. And I'm not going to read it all, but I'm going to read portions of it. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who are hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. Then I'm going to jump down a couple verses. And in verse 14, it says, "You are the light of the world." And I'm going to skip a little farther. Down to verse 16. And now you may see where I'm going. "Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." Are they telling me to do good works for myself? And I thought that was very interesting. It says, do good works so your Father in heaven is glorified.
Amen.
Not that I'm glorified, but your Father in heaven is glorified. So let's switch. And I'm going to kind of refer to this, so bear with me, and you don't need to follow this, but the same thing is recorded in Luke 6, 20 through 26. So let's jump to Matthew 5:44. And in this verse, it says, "But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless those that curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you." How easy is that to do? That's one of the hardest things to do there is, I think. If somebody slighted you, how do you get past that? So I'm going to keep going kind of quick. Let's go to Matthew 6, 1 through 4. "Take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men, to be seen by them. Otherwise you have no reward in heaven. And you're supposed to do them in secret." There's one other, and it's Luke 14, 12 to 13. And I'll just paraphrase it. "Make a feast, call the poor, the maimed, the lame, and the blind. Come feast with you." So I'm throwing out a bunch of little thoughts here. And we're coming down to some other things. So let's go to Matthew 6, 6. And what it says, "But you, when you pray, go into your room, and when you have shut your door, pray to your Father who is in the secret place. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly." Now let's jump to Matthew 6, 24 to 34. I got Bible stuff together here. And what it says, don't worry about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, or about your body, what you will put on. Is life more than food, and your body more than clothing? So we kind of know the rest of that, where God cares for the birds, and if he thinks of them, how important are you? So it's really God will take care of you, and seek him first. Let's switch over now to Matthew 10:42. And if you'll notice, I'm taking little snippets of what Matthew said. And it says, whosoever shall give to drink unto one of these little ones a cup of cold water, he shall in no wise lose his reward. If you look in Mark 9:41, it says, give them a cup of cold water in my name. And if you look in Luke 6:30, it says, give to every man that asketh of thee, and of him taketh away thy goods. And of him that taketh away thy goods, ask them not again. These are words of Jesus that can apply to us. So what's Jesus telling us in these? I think what he's telling us is to be humble and to be kind and to have compassion. And remember last week what Lily was talking about? She was talking about compassion. Well, I was sitting there listening to that and I go, she read my talk. Because how many times did Jesus have compassion? All the time. And so we look at some of the things that Jesus did now. Remember, Jesus is our example. And the things he did. So again, I've chosen to use Matthew and to outline Jesus' words. And again, they're throughout the Gospels. But it's interesting. My glasses are sliding. It's interesting that most are recorded in Matthew. And we'll get to that in a little bit. So if we start with Matthew 8, 1 through 4, there was the lepers healed. And Jesus told them, don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody what I've done to you. And I thought that was unique. And we've always, you hear in the Sabbath school lessons and you hear it in sermons about don't go tell anybody. I think there's a lesson in that. And we'll go down through this. And this story is also recorded in Mark and in Luke. And so we go to Matthew 8, 5 through 13, and the centurion's servant healed. So we're all familiar with that story. And Jesus, what Jesus said to the centurion was, there was part of it that was very interesting. I have not found so great faith. Now, who was the centurion? He was a Roman. And I kind of, for those that have been around the military, I kind of relate it to a captain. A centurion is a leader of 100 men. And so he was a captain in the Roman army. And what did Jews normally think of Romans? They hated him. And they really wanted Jesus to come and overthrow the Romans. And then if we look in Matthew 8:14, Peter's mother-in-law was healed. They said, hey, my mother-in-law is sick. And what did Jesus do? He healed her. And then in verse 8, or Matthew 8:16 through 17, he healed the demon-possessed and the sick. And if we go to Matthew 8:28, he healed the demonics, and the demons went into the pigs. And people were pretty upset about that. But as we look at this, we go down to Matthew 9, 1 through 8. And he heals the paralyzed man. Then we get down to Matthew 9, 18 through 26. He's healing the ruler's daughter. And there's an interesting sub-story in that, in healing the ruler's daughter. Somebody came up and touched Jesus' garment. And then in Matthew 9:27, he healed the two blind men. And this was in the New King James Version. It's interesting. Jesus gave them a stern warning not to tell anybody. Then we read in Matthew 12, 10 and 13, there was this discussion with the Pharisees about healing on the Sabbath. But what did Jesus say? He says, is it not good to heal on the Sabbath? And so he healed the man. So Jesus put an importance on taking care of people on the Sabbath. As we get into Matthew 14, verses 14 to 21, Jesus feeds 5,000 men. Now, normally we hear about this and it's described as feeding the 5,000. But I think it's probably closer to 15 to 20,000 people, which is a bigger miracle. And it says in verse 14, and Jesus went forth and saw a great multitude and was moved with compassion toward them, and he healed their sick. Then I read in, if you take a look at these, this is one of the only miracles that Jesus did that's recorded in all four Gospels. And I being a person that worked in organizations for years, in Mark 6, it describes how Jesus organized the people. Here's this great number of people, up to 20,000, maybe more even. And he organized it. And to me, organization is kind of amazing. How you deal with things, you've got to be organized. And that was kind of my career. But Jesus was an organized person, and he cared for people. And then we go down to Matthew 14:34 to 36. He heals the sick at Gennesaret. And people were just being healed by touching. They wanted to just touch the hem of his garment to be healed. And then we move to Matthew 15, verses 21 through 28. And in that, Jesus is healing a Canaanite woman.
Your daughter.
Yes, the daughter, the woman's daughter. Healing the Canaanite woman's daughter. And Jesus said, O woman, great is thy faith. Be it unto thee as thou wilt. And the daughter was made whole from that very hour. One of the things that happened in that situation was the disciples were trying to push that woman away. But what did Jesus do? He said, no. Come. And he took care of the daughter. And then if we look in Matthew 15, verses 29 to 31, healing many people on the mountain of Galilee, lame, blind, dumb, maimed, and others. Then we go to Matthew 15, 32 to 39. It says the feeding of the 4,000 with 7 loaves and a few fishes. And Jesus' own words, he said, I have compassion on the multitude, because they continue with me now 3 days and have nothing to eat. And I will not send them away fasting, lest they faint in the way. So there's places in the Bible where Jesus spoke and spoke of his compassion. It was recorded in Matthew. Spoke of his compassion. And so these verses show how Jesus cared for people. Do you see a common thread in those people? They were common people. There were Jews. There were Gentiles. There were the Romans. And I found something interesting. Jesus was not trying to impress the rulers and the Pharisees. And the more I looked into this and studied it, it just kind of became evident to me that he wasn't trying to impress anybody. He was trying to do things in secret. And we call it kind of staying under the radar. And he was taking care of anybody, all kinds of people. He cared. He had compassion. Let's look at one more aspect of Jesus. Who was Jesus calling to be his disciples? Well, let's look at Matthew 4, going back again. In Matthew 4, who are the people that Jesus asked to follow him? Common fishermen. How many of you ever been around fishermen? They're not necessarily common. They're very outspoken, I think. All of them I've ever known. They have pretty rough language. And they're hardworking people. So Jesus asked some of these really hardcore people to be his followers. And I thought that was very interesting. Then we go to Matthew 9 through 13. And Jesus calls Matthew a tax collector, and Jesus simply says, "Follow me." And you think about the tax collector. How was he viewed in Jewish society? He was despised. He was not one of the favorite people because he was gathering money for the Romans. So Jesus took this not well-liked person and said, "Hey, come follow me." I also found this interesting that Matthew is the one that recorded the most words of Jesus. And yet he was just a tax collector. And then also in this, right after this in the Bible, it records that Jesus sat down to eat, and there were many publicans and sinners eating with Jesus. And when the scribes and Pharisees saw him eating with the publicans and sinners, they said unto his disciples, "How is it that he eateth and drinketh with publicans and sinners?" So who did Jesus hang out with? And if we look in Matthew 10, verses 1 through 4, it says he chose the 12 disciples, including Judas. So, who were these people? The same question again. Who were these people? They were common people. They were fishermen, a tax collector,